Hello, my name's Jamie. I'm the head of our IAM practice across the Benelux region for Empiric Solutions. I'm here to host our next episode of Empiric Insights, which is our video series where we sit down with experts across different industries that we recruit for to hear their guidance and perspectives on the current influences shaping the industry today. Today, we're joined by MartinKuppinger of Kuppinger Analysts. So let's dive straight in.
I'm MartinKuppinger. I'm one of the founders of Kuppinger Analysts. We're a boutique analyst firm headquartered in Germany, focusing on identity and cybersecurity only. I founded this together with two partners some 20 plus years ago. And as I've said, we are really focused on everything which has to do with security and identity, including all the AI security that is hot these days and that is going wrong these days. Before that, I started economics. So quite a while ago, started with networking operating systems and stuff like that. So early Microsoft LAN Manager, NetWare, and things like that. And then in some way, I always stayed in this broader identity and security and networking, etc. space. I wrote a lot of books around IT topics and many articles and all the other stuff that are related to being an analyst. So that's a bit of my...
Oh yeah, thank you for that, Martin. And I think, yes, the identity space keeps generating new kind of acronyms and different tool categories which keep coming up. Coming from your perspective, when does this stop being helpful for organizations and start kind of creating problems for them?
So I think we need to always, we have the same in cybersecurity. So the average CISO reports that they have 70 to 80 different cybersecurity tools, which is extremely difficult to manage, where clearly some are in that are redundant, others there still might be gaps. And I think we are a bit at risk in the identity space to end up in a similar scenario because every innovation seems to lead to a new acronym, a new product category, even while it sometimes just features, as I say, improved features that fit quite well into an existing category. So like IWIP, identity visibility and intelligence platforms, that basically I would say is a new generation of advanced access governance tools which are around for decades. So it's more a capability than really a tool thing. And I think the risk for every decision maker and every organization is saying, okay, there's a need for some additional capabilities, but then ending up with another tool. And every tool at the end creates challenges. It's about cost. It's about really the people having the skills for managing these tools, etc. So there's really quite a lot of things that are involved in adding yet another tool. And so my recommendation really is to think about all of this from a capability perspective. So do I need it? Do I have it? If I don't have it, how important is it really compared also to other initiatives? If I have it a bit, so not fully, so how important is it to move towards, let's say, more perfection? Can I close the gap in other ways? How does it feel also into my entire architecture? Do I have the skills to manage it? What is the cost of integration and orchestration to other tools? And I think this just needs to be carefully evaluated. There are areas where you must act. So we've seen another area, KEAM, cloud infrastructure entitlement management, which was around getting a grip on the entitlements of service accounts on cloud resources. And many of the service accounts are massively over entitled, and this causes security risk. So you need to do something. Whether you need another tool or whether there are other approaches, that's a separate question. That's the one you need to ask yourself. The same like with this entire field, I don't like the term non-human identity management. So it's just basically a workload identity management. So really from all the workloads running these identities. And they're clearly, we need to get a grip on it. We need to bring them under governance, under management. But there we face a relatively sort of, let's say, a quickly evolving market, to avoid the term major. And that means, yes, you may make decisions for something. You may say, okay, I go for that or that technology now, but you also must be aware that in 2 or 3 years from now, there might be much better technologies. So also, when all these new things pop up, always keep in mind that innovation doesn't stop, and especially in these emerging markets, also decisions for tools may be too fast. They may be needed, but they also may be too fast. So I would say just applying a little bit of good human sense already helps a lot.
Oh, thank you very much, Martin, for that. And I think kind of answered partly the next question as well, I think. But I think many CISOs, especially the ones that we speak to here at Empiric, are finding themselves in a growing number of different security tools that are available across the market. So in identity, kind of what signs tell you that an organizer kind of drifting more into fragmentation rather than building something kind of coherent?
I see a mixed situation in the market. So we also talk to a lot of CISOs, to a lot of large organizations, and it's interesting to see that quite a lot of these organizations are looking at defining their sort of more, let's say, structured approach. So we see several that follow a principle called identity fabric, something we came up with a couple of years ago, which really has gained a lot of momentum in the market, more as a paradigm on how to put all these pieces together and go from capabilities to services to finally tools, but in a very consistent manner. And the same is something you can do clearly in cybersecurity. But we also see the other side of it, where decisions are made sometimes a bit too hasty. And I think, especially for cybersecurity and everything which is related to security, the big challenge is, and I think that's a problem for a CISO, if you don't act, you're at risk of being blamed guilty for something going wrong. If you act, you're risking spending the money wrong. You're risking to end up with integration with operational challenges, etc. So it's a difficult balance to find. And I think for cybersecurity, it's very worth also to think about to which extent does it really help you mitigating the really critical issues, and which other options do you have to increase your cybersecurity posture.
Thank you. And I think on the kind of flip side of it as well, obviously we mentioned there's so many growing security tools, but a lot of professionals are now building like a deep expertise in like a single vendor or a technology. When does that start to hold organizations back as they're trying to modernize their security program?
I'm around for a while, as I've said at the beginning, and I remember the days when Windows NT and then Windows Server came to the market. Novel Netware was very strong back in these days, and there were a lot of let's say intense conversations between the two groups, the Windows and the Novel Netware groups, and what I observed even back then is that a lot of these conversations weren't driven by facts, and a sort of a proper comparison of the two environments, but by protecting the own sort of skills and value. So with a strong knowledge of one tool, the other was attacked, and that stops organizations in moving forward in making good decisions. And it takes a lot of time. And I also spend a lot of time in organizations where whatever the European team had Microsoft Entra ID in place. There was a US team that had Okta in place. And then there was a discussion about really nitty-gritty features, which aren't relevant at all. But the one said, oh, we need to use this because of that. And the other said, we need to use this because of that. And that costs a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of nerves to go through these conversations. And I think what is the interesting point is, if you're a professional in let's say in one or two access management tools, it should be relatively straightforward to also become really good, really relatively quickly and with reasonable effort in the next one, and so on. It's more difficult clearly to say, okay, whatever, you've been really strong in access management authentication, and right now you're looking at whatever workload identity management, non-human identity management. There's a gap a bit larger, but even then, you usually don't start from zero. And I personally feel that someone really can increase the sort of the own value by being more open and knowing a bit more, because the other thing is also the more tools you know, the easier it will be to learn the next one.
And as businesses look to move beyond the tools and think more in terms of the kind of methods, the process, the organization, what do you see as the skills that are most often missing from the teams when trying to make that shift?
Yeah. So I think first, too many organizations don't look on processes and policies and all the methodological stuff. So the tool is always the final thing. And at the end, what I say, if you have a really good process, then the process should survive the tool, because it must be so strong and so well defined that it's independent, because it's an organizational thing. And clearly we have the situation of that process and workflow competencies aren't that broadly available amongst a lot of the identity and security people. These days, we observe that even fundamental identity and security skills are obviously lacking in the developers space for many of them, because when you see what is happening right now with Claudebot or Moldbot or OpenClaw, then it's very clear there's also really a massive gap in understanding identity and cybersecurity. But and I think this is also very important to understand. We need really more of these skills everywhere. But when I go back to identity, I think there's the technical aspect. So really understanding how to develop or to customize a tool, how to orchestration and all that stuff, to how to set it up. But there's also really this more process and also organizational skill set that is very important. And that is something which I feel can really make a difference when someone wants to enter that field.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And something else is obviously that's mentioned is obviously like role management being quite criticised in practice, yet still sits at the centre of many identity programs. Why do you think that it persists, and what should organisations be doing differently when it comes to role management?
So I think role management is something which is quite popular. The problem is when you look at the core discipline of identity management, one of the core disciplines, which is IG, Identity Governance Administration, which is really user lifecycle management, which is provisioning, which is everything around that, also the governance elements. Then the problem is there are a couple of common, let's say, call it diseases of these IGA programs. The one is recertification. So no departmental manager really likes to do recertification or attestation of entitlements. We need to figure out how can we do it better or avoid it and still remain compliant. And that's doable. There's application onboarding, which is tricky. AI starts to help here if done right. And there's clearly the over customization. So every bell and whistle is added, and at some point you don't see the tool anymore. You can't handle it. You can't run upgrades or anything. And last and least, there's role management. And role management projects tend to stall. They tend to end up in a overly complex state. And so we need to think about, is this really the right way to do? Anyway, static entitlements, which are behind role management, are not a good way to handle security, because they tend to be outdated, they tend to be over entitlement. So they are, in a sense, they are the root cause of all bad in identity management. But we still see a lot of people, a lot of identity management professionals pushing for role management projects, which is, I would say, from individual perspective, I can understand it. So they are experienced, they know how to do it, even while they still tend to run in trouble with the project. It's sort of their distinguishing skill set. It's their value. Still, I feel we need to think beyond and step back and think about what can we do differently, and how can we minimize the use of roles and use better approaches like externalization of authorization, dynamic authorizations, just-in-time access, stuff like that. But clearly that means that people must change. They must add skills. But from a customer perspective, there's clearly a huge value in moving towards more modern approaches and concepts.
And to wrap up with that, in terms of, is there anything else that you think we haven't covered that might be important for hiring managers or just day-to-day cybersecurity professionals who are looking to build teams or their career within the industry?
So I think that there's the individual perspective, and the individual perspective, I think it's about continuous learning, because things are evolving. There are new technologies emerging, and I think there's a continuous requirement and also demand for people that are skilled in new technologies, and every individual in this space can increase the own value by looking at new technologies, by learning something in addition. And so that's still, I think that is very important. From an organizational perspective, I think there are two, or there's one main aspect. I think everyone rightfully says we have a skills gap. We don't find the resources we need. And so the question is, what can you do? And I think one part is invest in your resources, invest in training, invest in having students early on in your organization for the internships and all that stuff. But also think beyond. So take the workflow, the process skills. A lot of SAP people have excellent skills in business processes. So they might be able to shift into the identity space rather quickly, because they have certain really essential skills. And these are I would say, the difficult ones to learn. So the process skills are surely something which takes you longer, more experience than learning certain development skills or certain configuration or admin skills for a single product. And so that can be very valuable resources. I think from a hiring perspective, being a bit more open-minded, thinking about who could fill these gaps is important. And I think what also can help is really because security and also identity, clearly also spending a lot of work in let's say, cleaning up behind the others. So invest, for instance, into the skills of your software architects, your developers. Invest in collaboration so that they work with you, and not that you then need to care for what has gone wrong in that space. I think that can really save a lot over time. And clearly also managed services. I think especially when it comes to security operations, then looking for managed services and building a proper sort of pyramid of people from internal experts to external experts. So the ones who know really your world best, the others who maybe have the deepest expertise in handling security incidents, bringing these together probably is absolutely also important.
Thank you very much, Martin. Thanks again for tuning in. See you again next time.